Not all cars are built to last, and some, well, they were just built to fail. Today we're diving into the 12 super worst old cars you've probably never seen. From design catastrophes to cars that couldn't even get out of their own way, these machines were nothing short of disasters. Get ready for the most bizarre, embarrassing, and downright cringeworthy cars ever to hit the road. Ready for the ride? Let's go. The 1961 Amphicar Model 770 holds a peculiar place in automotive history as the car that could do it all, or more accurately, do it all poorly. Designed to function as both a car and a boat, the Amphicar was a true novelty. Unfortunately, this ambitious dual-purpose design came at the expense of practicality, reliability, and performance. It quickly gained a reputation for being underwhelming on land, mediocre in the water, and frustrating to maintain. Yet, despite its flaws, the Amphicar has managed to charm its way into the hearts of collectors and enthusiasts as a quirky relic of a bygone era. The Amphicar was born out of post-war optimism and a wave of creative experimentation in the automotive industry. Designed by Hans Trippel and manufactured in Germany by the Quant Group, the Amphicar Model 770 was touted as a revolutionary concept, the first mass-produced amphibious car available to the public. The 770 in its name referred to its alleged performance capabilities, 7 knots on water and 70 miles on land. While these numbers sounded impressive on paper, real-world performance often fell short, especially when compared to other cars or boats. On land, the Amphicar was powered by a 1.1-liter Triumph Herald inline-4 engine producing a modest 43 horsepower. This was just enough to propel the 2,300-pound car to a top speed of around 65 km/h, if you were patient. Acceleration was leisurely, to say the least, and the car's handling was hampered by its dual-purpose design. With a high center of gravity, narrow tires, and a suspension setup that prioritized water buoyancy over road dynamics, the Amphicar was far from confidence-inspiring on twisty roads or in emergency maneuvers. Once in the water, things didn't improve much. The Amphicar relied on twin propellers mounted at the rear for propulsion, with the front wheels acting as rudders. While it could technically float and move, the experience was far from smooth or efficient. At 7 knots, about 8 miles, the Amphicar was barely faster than a leisurely swim, and its seaworthiness was questionable at best. Waves, strong currents, or even moderate winds could quickly turn an Amphicar excursion into a nerve-wracking adventure. Worse, the car's seals often leaked, leading to the unfortunate need for frequent bailing or repairs to avoid sinking, a feature most boat owners would find unacceptable. One owner summed up the Amphicar experience with dark humor. "It's the fastest car on water and the fastest boat on land, but only because no one else is crazy enough to try it." Another quipped, "It's the only car where your road trip essentials include a life jacket and a bucket." Reliability issues aside, the Amphicar's novelty factor was undeniable. It captured the imagination of those who dreamed of seamlessly transitioning from road to water, and it appealed to adventurers looking for something truly different. For some, the sheer absurdity of owning a car that could drive straight into a lake was worth the compromises. It also became a favorite of celebrities and eccentrics, with owners including President Lyndon B. Johnson, who reportedly loved to prank unsuspecting guests by driving his Amphicar into a lake while pretending the brakes had failed. Despite its ambitious concept, the Amphicar was a commercial failure. Between 1961 and 1968, only about 3,878 units were produced, with the majority sold in the United States. Its high price tag, about $3,000 at the time, combined with its lackluster performance and maintenance headaches, made it a tough sell. Safety and environmental regulations in the late 1960s sealed its fate, and production ended after just 7 years. Today, the Amphicar is viewed more as a historical curiosity than a serious vehicle. Its unique design and quirky charm have made it a sought-after collectible, with restored examples fetching high prices at auctions. Enthusiast groups and clubs around the world celebrate the Amphicar, organizing meetups and rallies where owners can share their love for this oddball creation. Modern owners have also addressed some of the car's shortcomings, retrofitting better seals, more reliable engines, and improved propellers to make the Amphicar more usable. The Amphicar's legacy is one of ambition and innovation tempered by harsh realities. It stands as a reminder that pushing the boundaries of design often involves compromise, and sometimes failure. While it may not have succeeded as a practical vehicle, the Amphicar's whimsical spirit and audacious concept continue to capture imaginations. For those willing to embrace its flaws, it offers something truly unique, the joy of merging two worlds, however imperfectly. In the end, the 1961 Amphicar Model 770 is remembered less for what it could do and more for what it tried to be, a symbol of a time when anything seemed possible, even if the execution left something to be desired. It's not the best car or boat you could own. The 1967 Chevrolet Corvair remains one of the most infamous cars in American automotive history, not so much for what it was, but for the controversy that surrounded it. By the late 1960s, Chevrolet had significantly improved the Corvair, addressing many of the handling and safety concerns that had plagued earlier models. However, the damage to its reputation was already done, thanks in large part to Ralph Nader's landmark 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed, which heavily criticized the first-generation Corvair for its allegedly dangerous handling. Despite its virtues as an affordable and innovative compact car, the Corvair never fully recovered from the stigma. The Corvair was Chevrolet's ambitious answer to European-style compact cars like the Volkswagen Beetle and Porsche 356. It was a radical departure from traditional American car design, featuring a rear-mounted air-cooled flat-six engine, independent suspension, and sleek styling. The first generation, 1960 to 1964, was a commercial success, selling well and earning praise for its smooth ride and affordability. However, it didn't take long for controversy to brew. Critics pointed out that the early Corvair's swing-axle rear suspension design made it prone to oversteer, especially in the hands of inexperienced drivers. Combined with Chevrolet's decision to forego a front anti-roll bar in base models to cut costs, the car developed a reputation for being difficult to control in emergency maneuvers. Ralph Nader's Unsafe at Any Speed became the nail in the Corvair's coffin. The book accused Chevrolet of prioritizing profits over safety and claimed the Corvair was a death trap, though it primarily focused on the 1960 and 1963 models. While Nader's criticisms had some mild merit, many experts argued that his conclusions were overstated. In fact, a 1972 National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, study later concluded that the first-generation Corvair's handling was comparable to that of other cars of its era. Nevertheless, the damage to the Corvair's reputation was irreversible. By the time the second generation debuted in 1965, Chevrolet had addressed many of the earlier criticisms. The redesigned Corvair featured a fully independent rear suspension similar to that of the Corvette, greatly improving handling and stability. The new styling was more sophisticated, with clean lines and a sportier look. The Corvair also offered a variety of configurations, including coupes, sedans, convertibles, and wagons, as well as high-performance options like the turbocharged Corsa. Despite these improvements, sales began to decline sharply after 1965. Public perception of the Corvair had been tainted by Nader's book, and the rise of the Ford Mustang further eroded its market share. By 1967, Chevrolet was winding down production, focusing instead on the Camaro to compete in the burgeoning pony car segment. The Corvair remained in production through 1969, but by then it was a shadow of its former self, with dwindling sales and little corporate support. The 1967 Corvair itself was a solid car. It featured refinements such as better interior appointments, improved safety equipment, including a dual-circuit braking system, and more reliable mechanical components. However, these updates weren't enough to overcome the stigma attached to the nameplate. As one owner lamented, "You could have the best driving car on the block, but if it's a Corvair, all anyone sees is what they read in Nader's book." In hindsight, the Corvair was an innovative and forward-thinking car that deserved a better fate. Its engineering, particularly the second-generation models, was ahead of its time, offering features like turbocharging and a rear-engine layout long before they became common in performance and sports cars. Enthusiasts today appreciate the Corvair for its uniqueness in the driving experience it offers, a blend of European handling dynamics with American style. Modern collectors have embraced the Corvair, especially second-generation models, which are prized for their improved performance and timeless design. Corvair clubs and enthusiasts have worked to rehabilitate its image, celebrating it as an example of Chevrolet's willingness to take risks and innovate in an era dominated by conformity. The 1967 Chevrolet Corvair serves as a cautionary tale about the power of public perception and the importance of safety in automotive design. While it may be remembered as one of the worst cars in the context of its tarnished reputation, it's also remembered as a car that dared to be different and paid the price for it. In the end, the Corvair's legacy is one of innovation overshadowed by controversy, a misunderstood icon of automotive history. The 1970 Ford Pinto has gone down in history not just as a car, but as a cautionary tale about the dangers of corporate cost-cutting and the devastating consequences of prioritizing profits over safety. Though initially conceived as an affordable, lightweight car to compete with imports like the Volkswagen Beetle and Toyota Corolla, the Pinto is infamous today for its poorly designed fuel tank, which made it prone to catching fire in rear-end collisions. This flaw, coupled with revelations about Ford's internal decision-making process, transformed the Pinto from a simple economy car into a symbol of everything wrong with American automotive practices of the era. When the Pinto was introduced in 1970 as a 1971 model, Ford was eager to get a slice of the booming compact car market. Lee Iacocca, then president of Ford, famously declared that the Pinto needed to weigh less than 2,000 pounds and cost under $2,000, a formula designed to appeal to budget-conscious buyers during a time of rising fuel prices. To meet this aggressive goal, Ford's engineers and designers worked on a fast-track timeline of just 25 months, far shorter than the usual 43 months required to develop a car. The result was a small, lightweight vehicle with simple styling and a no-frills approach. On paper, the Pinto was exactly what the market demanded: affordable, efficient, and easy to maintain. Initially, it sold well, with over 328,000 units moved in its debut year. The Pinto was offered in several configurations, including a two-door coupe, hatchback, and wagon, making it versatile enough to attract a wide range of customers. However, beneath its pragmatic exterior lay a critical flaw: the fuel tank's placement. The Pinto's gas tank was located behind the rear axle and positioned just a few inches from the rear bumper. In the event of a rear-end collision, the tank was vulnerable to being punctured by nearby bolts and sharp edges. Worse, the car's design lacked reinforcements that could have prevented fuel from leaking and igniting in such situations. Ford's internal documents, which later became public during lawsuits, revealed a chilling truth. The company was aware of the defect before the car ever hit the market. Engineers had proposed several solutions to reinforce the fuel tank, but Ford's management dismissed them, citing cost concerns. One memo infamously calculated that fixing the defect would cost $11 per car, which Ford deemed too expensive. Instead, they relied on a cost-benefit analysis that compared the expense of fixing the issue to the estimated payouts for lawsuits resulting from fatalities and injuries. This decision came back to haunt Ford when real-world crashes began highlighting the Pinto's vulnerability. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in 1972, when 3 teenage girls in Indiana died after their Pinto was rear-ended, causing the car to burst into flames. Lawsuits began piling up, and as journalists and safety advocates dug deeper, the Pinto's reputation was irreparably damaged. By the late 1970s, the phrase Pinto crash test became shorthand for corporate negligence, and Ralph Nader's advocacy for auto safety added further scrutiny to the case. From a technical perspective, the Pinto was not inherently worse than many other small cars of its time. In fact, tests conducted by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, later revealed that the Pinto's fuel tank design performed similarly to other cars in its class during rear-end collisions. However, Ford's decision to forego improvements and the public's perception of the company's cold, profit-driven calculus cemented the Pinto's place in history as a symbol of corporate indifference. By the time production ended in 1980, Ford had sold over 3 million Pintos, yet the car's legacy is overshadowed by its association with the now infamous Ford Pinto memo and the lawsuits that followed. While the Pinto wasn't the only car of its era to have safety flaws, it became a lightning rod for criticism due to Ford's apparent willingness to sacrifice consumer safety for cost savings. For many owners, the Pinto was just an inexpensive, reliable car. One former owner reminisced, "It got me through college. I drove it everywhere and I never had a problem. But when I heard about the fires, I couldn't look at it the same way." Another said, "I loved my Pinto wagon. It had plenty of room for my gear, but people would joke about it catching fire every time they saw it." Today, the Pinto has achieved a sort of infamy in automotive history. While its design flaws and corporate controversies make it a symbol of what can go wrong in the industry, some enthusiasts have embraced the Pinto as a quirky relic of the 1970s. Restored examples can occasionally be found at car shows, often with owners who relish the opportunity to explain the car's controversial backstory. The 1975 Austin Allegro is a car that has become synonymous with British automotive missteps of the 1970s. Despite being intended as a modern, innovative small family car, it is now remembered for its awkward design, mechanical unreliability, and infamous quartic, square-shaped steering wheel, a feature that exemplified its ambition but also its failure to deliver. Dubbed the Allegro by critics and owners alike, the Allegro became a symbol of British Leyland's struggles during an era marked by labor unrest, cost-cutting, and declining quality. The Allegro was launched in 1973 by British Leyland, or BL, as the successor to the popular Austin 1100-1300 series. It was intended to be a revolutionary step forward, incorporating advanced engineering and fresh styling to compete with the likes of the Volkswagen Golf and Ford Escort. Designed by Harris Mann, the Allegro was supposed to project a modern, aerodynamic aesthetic. However, what ended up on showroom floors was a bulbous, almost cartoonish shape that many found unattractive. Mann himself later lamented that cost constraints and interference from BL management compromised his original design. Underneath its polarizing exterior, the Allegro featured some advanced ideas for the time. It came with BL's Hydrogas suspension system, designed to provide a smooth ride by using interconnected gas and fluid spheres. While innovative in concept, the system was plagued by reliability issues and difficult repairs, leaving many owners frustrated. The Allegro's mechanical woes didn't end there. Frequent oil leaks, poorly fitted components, and rust-prone body panels contributed to its reputation for unreliability. Perhaps the most infamous feature of the Allegro was its quartic steering wheel. Aimed at improving driver visibility and comfort, the rectangular design was marketed as a bold ergonomic innovation. However, drivers found it awkward and uncomfortable to use, and the feature was quietly abandoned in later models. The quartic wheel has since become a symbol of the Allegro's overreach and misguided ambition. The Allegro also suffered from serious performance shortcomings. Despite being available with a range of engine options, including 1.1L, 1.3L, and 1.5L power plants, it was underpowered compared to its rivals. The engines inherited from older models were neither efficient nor particularly refined. Combined with the car's significant weight and uninspiring handling, the Allegro failed to deliver a satisfying driving experience. Adding to the Allegro's woes was British Leyland's chaotic corporate environment. Strikes and inconsistent quality control plagued the company throughout the 1970s, leading to cars that were often poorly assembled. One owner recalled, "It felt like my Allegro was built by people who hated their jobs. I spent more time fixing it than driving it." Another quipped, "If it wasn't rusting, it was leaking oil. If it wasn't leaking oil, it was breaking down." Despite its flaws, the Allegro sold reasonably well in the UK during its production run from 1973 to 1982, largely thanks to BL's strong dealer network and the car's low price. However, its reputation as a poorly made, uninspiring car was impossible to shake. Competing models like the Volkswagen Golf and Ford Escort were simply better in almost every way, offering superior performance, reliability, and design. Internationally, the Allegro fared even worse, failing to gain traction in export markets where buyers were less forgiving. Today, the Allegro is often remembered as one of the worst cars ever made, earning a place in countless worst car lists and automotive histories. However, a small but dedicated group of enthusiasts has emerged to celebrate the car's quirks and its role as a symbol of 1970s British automotive culture. At car shows and classic rallies, restored Allegros stand as reminders of a time when British Leyland, despite its many flaws, dared to think differently, even if the results were less than successful. The Austin Allegro's legacy is a mixed one. On the one hand, it highlights the pitfalls of poor management, rushed development, and overambitious design. On the other, it serves as an example of a car that, despite its many faults, has managed to endure in the public consciousness. For better or worse, the Allegro's story is a chapter in the rich tapestry of automotive history, offering lessons for car makers and enthusiasts alike. The 1981 DeLorean DMC-12 is one of the most recognizable cars ever made, thanks to its starring role in the Back to the Future trilogy. But beneath its cinematic legacy lies a car that, when judged solely on its merits as an automobile, was deeply flawed. Despite its futuristic looks and ambitious goals, the DeLorean DMC-12 was underpowered, overpriced, and plagued by quality control issues that tarnished its reputation long before Hollywood turned it into an icon. John DeLorean, the man behind the car, was a visionary who had already made a name for himself as a top executive at General Motors. After leaving GM, he founded the DeLorean Motor Company, DMC, in 1975 with the dream of building a car that would revolutionize the automotive world. The result was the DMC-12, a striking gull-wing sports car with a stainless steel body that was as bold as it was impractical. The DMC-12 was styled by Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the most celebrated car designers of the era. Its wedge-shaped profile and unpainted stainless steel panels gave it an otherworldly appearance, ensuring that it turned heads wherever it went. The gull-wing doors added an additional touch of drama, making the car look like something out of a science fiction movie even before its Hollywood debut. However, the stainless steel body, while visually impressive, was prone to fingerprints and dents, making maintenance a headache for owners. Underneath the striking exterior, the DeLorean's engineering failed to live up to its visual promise. The car was powered by a 2.85L PRV V6 engine, a joint venture between Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, mounted in a rear-engine configuration. While the engine was reasonably durable, it produced only 130 horsepower, which was woefully inadequate for a car that looked as fast as the DeLorean. Acceleration from 0 to 60 mph took a sluggish 10.5 seconds, a performance figure that couldn't compete with contemporaries like the Porsche 911 or even the Chevrolet Corvette. To make matters worse, the DMC-12 was hampered by its Lotus-derived chassis. While it provided adequate handling, it wasn't enough to overcome the car's significant weight of over 2,700 pounds, which further dulled performance. The car's automatic transmission option only compounded these issues, as it sapped even more power from the already struggling engine. Quality control was another Achilles heel for the DeLorean. Production was handled at a factory in Dunmurry, Northern Ireland, where an inexperienced workforce struggled to meet the company's high standards. Many early DMC-12s left the factory with defects ranging from poorly aligned body panels to electrical problems. One owner recounted, "It felt like I was driving a prototype, not a finished car, something always needed fixing." Another said, "It was beautiful to look at, but getting it to run properly was a nightmare." Adding to its woes was the car's hefty price tag. The DMC-12 cost around $25,000 in 1981, equivalent to over $80,000 today when adjusted for inflation. For that money, buyers expected high performance and reliability, two things the DeLorean simply couldn't deliver. Sales never reached the levels needed to sustain the company, and DMC quickly fell into financial trouble. By 1982, the DeLorean Motor Company was on the verge of collapse. In a desperate attempt to save his company, John DeLorean became embroiled in a highly publicized drug trafficking sting, further tarnishing the car's reputation. Although DeLorean was ultimately acquitted of the charges, the damage was done. The company went bankrupt, and production of the DMC-12 ceased after only about 9,000 units had been built. Despite its commercial failure, the DeLorean found a second life as the time machine in Back to the Future, released in 1985. The movie's massive success transformed the DMC-12 into a pop culture icon, and its flaws as a car were largely overshadowed by its newfound fame. Today, the DeLorean enjoys a cult following, with fans embracing its quirks and imperfections as part of its charm. For some owners, the car is a labor of love. One enthusiast explained, "It's not the fastest or most reliable car, but every time I drive it, people smile. It's a piece of history." Another said, "The DeLorean isn't about performance, it's about the story it tells." The 1981 DeLorean DMC-12 is a car that's difficult to evaluate in isolation. As a vehicle, it was undeniably flawed, slow, overpriced, and riddled with quality issues. Yet as a cultural artifact, it has become something far greater than the sum of its parts. The DeLorean story is one of ambition, failure, and redemption, making it one of the most fascinating cars in automotive history. For better or worse, it's a car that will never be forgotten. The 1974 Bricklin SV-1 is one of the most ambitious yet tragically flawed cars ever to emerge from the North American automotive scene. Conceived by entrepreneur Malcolm Bricklin, who had already introduced Subaru to the U.S. market, the SV-1, short for Safety Vehicle 1, was marketed as a futuristic sports car with safety as its core philosophy. With features like impact-absorbing bumpers, a plastic body, and dramatic gull-wing doors, the SV-1 looked like a car from the future. However, it quickly became a symbol of overpromised innovation and underwhelming execution. Malcolm Bricklin envisioned the SV-1 as a revolutionary car that would combine cutting-edge safety features with high performance and a striking design. Built in Canada, the SV-1's most distinctive features were its gull-wing doors and fiberglass-reinforced acrylic body panels. These panels were available in bold, molded-in colors like orange, green, and white, eliminating the need for traditional paint. The gull-wing doors, while visually stunning, were operated by hydraulics that frequently failed, leaving owners stranded with doors that either wouldn't open or close properly. Safety was the car's primary selling point. Bricklin touted its impact-resistant bumpers, integrated roll cage, and the absence of an ashtray as proof of its forward-thinking design. However, these safety features were more theoretical than practical, as the SV-1's poor build quality and reliability often overshadowed its intended virtues. Under the hood, early SV-1s were powered by a 5.9L AMC V8 engine, producing 220 horsepower, paired with either a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic transmission. Later models switched to a less powerful 5.8L Ford V8 with 175 horsepower. Despite its sports car appearance, the SV-1's weight, nearly 30,600 pounds, meant performance was underwhelming. It struggled to deliver the speed and handling expected from a car that looked so aggressive. Reliability issues plagued the SV-1 from the start. The complex hydraulic system for the gull-wing doors was notorious for leaks and failures. The acrylic body panels were prone to cracking, warping, and fading, especially when exposed to the elements. Overheating was another common problem, as the car's cooling system often failed to keep the big V8 engines in check. One frustrated owner recalled, "Driving it was an adventure. If you could get it started, you didn't know if it would make it home." Production quality was inconsistent at best. The cars were assembled in a newly built factory in New Brunswick, Canada, staffed largely by inexperienced workers. This inexperience, combined with rushed production schedules and financial troubles, resulted in numerous defects that made their way to customers. One reviewer at the time remarked, "It's as if the car was built on a dare." The SV-1 was also expensive, costing around $7,500 in 1974, about $45,000 today. For that price, buyers expected a reliable, high-performance sports car, but what they got was a car that often required constant maintenance just to remain drivable. By 1976, the company was bankrupt, and only about 3,000 Bricklin SV-1s had been built. Despite its failures, the Bricklin SV-1 has gained a cult following in the decades since its demise. Enthusiasts are drawn to its bold design, quirky features, and the audacity of its concept. At car shows, restored SV-1s often draw crowds, with spectators marveling at the car's unique combination of gull-wing doors and retro-futuristic styling. One passionate owner shared, "Yes, it's a nightmare to maintain, but when those doors open and people stop to stare, it's worth every headache." Another joked, "Owning a Bricklin is like owning a piece of history and a constant reminder that ambition doesn't always lead to success." The 1974 Bricklin SV-1 is a textbook example of how vision alone isn't enough to create a successful car. While its bold design and safety-first philosophy set it apart from other vehicles of its time, its poor execution and numerous flaws doomed it to failure. Yet, for all its faults, the SV-1 remains a fascinating chapter in automotive history, a car that dared to be different but fell short of its lofty goals. Today, it stands as a reminder that sometimes even the best ideas can crash and burn. The 1971 Chrysler Imperial LeBaron two-doors is a prime example of 1970s automotive excess, a car built to deliver luxury and presence but ultimately faltering. In the face of practicality and modernity, Chrysler's flagship vehicle, the Imperial, had long been a symbol of opulence, but by the early 70s, it had become a bloated relic of an era that was slowly being left behind. With its massive size, poor fuel economy, and an uncomfortable lack of technological sophistication, the 1971 Imperial LeBaron two-door was a luxury car that was, in many ways, more about excess than refinement. At nearly 19 feet long and over 3,000 pounds, the 1971 Imperial LeBaron was an absolute beast on the road. Its size alone was enough to turn heads, but not for the right reasons. Chrysler had built a car so large that maneuvering it through tight spaces, such as parking lots or crowded city streets, became a daily struggle. The sheer bulk of the car, combined with the unwieldy handling that came with such mass, made the LeBaron an intimidating and often frustrating car to drive. Owners frequently commented on how it felt like driving a boat, and for many the experience was far from the smooth, luxurious ride they had hoped for. As a luxury vehicle, the LeBaron promised comfort, but the execution was less than stellar. Its plush interior, adorned with high-end materials like leather seats and fine wood trim, was certainly eye-catching. However, the driving experience was less than refined. Despite its plush seating, the car felt cumbersome, with an overstuffed cabin that did little to enhance the feeling of elegance. The ride was soft, but not in the way that modern luxury cars are known for. Instead, it had the kind of softness that felt detached from the road, leaving passengers swaying and jostling in their seats. Under the hood, the Imperial LeBaron came with a massive 440 cubic inch V8 engine, which produced a respectable 350 horsepower. While this engine was powerful enough to propel the massive car with some authority, it was severely limited by its poor fuel efficiency. The car consumed gas at a prodigious rate, often averaging single-digit miles per gallon. In an era when fuel efficiency was becoming a pressing concern, especially with the aftermath of the 1973 oil crisis, the Imperial's thirst for gas made it an impractical choice for most drivers. The 1971 Imperial LeBaron was also plagued by a lack of modern features. Despite its luxury aspirations, it came with few of the innovations that were starting to appear in other high-end cars of the time. For example, the car had no air conditioning or power windows as standard options. Both were expensive add-ons. Safety features, too, were limited. Despite its massive size, the Imperial didn't offer the kind of modern crash protection that would become, say, standard in later decades, making it feel outdated even when it was new. Another significant issue was the car's price. At over $10,000, about $70,000 in today's money, the 1971 Imperial LeBaron was far more expensive than many of its competitors, including high-end models from Cadillac and Lincoln. But for that price, buyers didn't get much in terms of innovation or quality. The car's reputation for poor build quality only compounded the issue. Chrysler's assembly line struggled with quality control, and owners often faced issues with rust, electrical failures, and trim pieces coming loose. These issues left a lasting sour taste in the mouths of many buyers, and the car's value quickly plummeted in the years following its release. Despite its flaws, the 1971 Chrysler Imperial LeBaron two-door is an interesting artifact of its time, a car that represents the height of 1970s automotive excess. One owner summed it up by saying, "It was the kind of car that made you feel like royalty, but you couldn't drive it anywhere without getting a headache." Another recalled, "It was so big and thirsty you had to plan your trips around gas stations." In hindsight, the 1971 Chrysler Imperial LeBaron two-door stands as a testament to an era of overindulgence, where bigger was often seen as better, but refinement and practicality were left by the wayside. It epitomized a brand of luxury that was more about size and presence than real comfort or innovation. As such, it failed to meet the expectations of buyers looking for a truly luxurious experience, becoming a symbol of automotive excess without the refinement that should have accompanied it. The 1982 Cadillac Cimarron stands as one of the most infamous blunders in automotive history. A car that not only missed the mark, but also set back the reputation of one of the most prestigious luxury brands in the world. Cadillac, long associated with grandeur, innovation, and exceptional quality, took a massive misstep with the Cimarron, a car that was little more than a rebadged Chevrolet Cavalier sold at a premium price. The Cimarron epitomized everything wrong with the automotive world during the early 80s, a misguided attempt to capture a market that didn't exist, and an ill-conceived strategy that tarnished the Cadillac name. The Cimarron was part of Cadillac's effort to expand its lineup and reach a younger, more budget-conscious demographic, trying to compete in the compact luxury car market. Cadillac's executives believed that offering a smaller, more affordable car would help introduce the brand to a new generation of buyers. The idea was simple. Take the Chevrolet Cavalier, a modest and affordable compact car, and give it Cadillac's luxury badge, some extra trim, and a higher price tag. What they failed to realize was that the formula didn't work. Under the hood, the Cimarron was powered by a 1.8-liter four-cylinder engine, producing a meager 88 horsepower, which was hardly the sort of performance buyers would expect from a Cadillac. The car's acceleration was lethargic at best, and the handling was unremarkable, even by the standards of small sedans at the time. Buyers who were looking for Cadillac's reputation for smooth rides and powerful engines were sorely disappointed, as the Cimarron simply didn't live up to the brand's prestigious legacy. Despite its luxurious badge, the Cimarron's interior was far from upscale. The cabin featured cheap plastics and cloth seats, while the dashboard design was simple and uninspired, offering few of the luxurious touches Cadillac was known for. Even the leather option was low-grade, and the materials used felt subpar compared to the opulence associated with Cadillac. It was clear that the car was a product of cost-cutting measures rather than a thoughtful approach to creating a true luxury compact. In terms of features, the Cimarron offered very little that justified its higher price tag. While it had a few more amenities than the Chevrolet Cavalier, such as power windows and air conditioning, these were standard features on many other cars at the time. The Cimarron's build quality was also criticized for being subpar, with many owners complaining about rattles, poor fitment of interior panels, and premature wear and tear on key components. What Cadillac attempted to sell as an affordable entry-level luxury car ended up being a vehicle that felt cheap and underwhelming, especially for the price of $10,000, equivalent to around $28,000 today. The most damaging aspect of the Cimarron's failure was how it impacted Cadillac's reputation. The brand that once symbolized elegance, precision, and world-class craftsmanship now found itself associated with an underwhelming, compact sedan that offered none of the qualities Cadillac was known for. Sales were sluggish from the start, and the car was widely criticized for what it was: a glorified economy car with a Cadillac badge. Rather than attract a new generation of buyers, the Cimarron alienated longtime Cadillac fans, many of whom saw it as a betrayal of the brand's heritage. One disgruntled owner summed it up perfectly. "It felt like Cadillac tried to cheap out on everything. I thought I was buying a luxury car, but it was just a dressed-up Cavalier with a premium price tag. It didn't even drive like a Cadillac." Another owner commented, "I didn't expect a Cadillac to have the power of a V8, but this thing barely had the power to get out of its own way. I regretted that purchase almost immediately." The Cimarron was so poorly received that it became a punchline in the automotive world. Cadillac's attempt to reach a younger demographic with a smaller, more affordable car backfired spectacularly. By the time it was discontinued in 1988, The Cimarron had done irreparable damage to the brand's image. It was replaced by the Cadillac STS, which sought to restore some semblance of prestige to the lineup. But the Cimarron's legacy of failure lingered long after it had disappeared from the showroom floors. In hindsight, the 1982 Cadillac Cimarron represents a glaring misstep in Cadillac's history. A car designed to bring luxury to the compact segment ended up feeling more like an embarrassment, a misguided attempt to stretch the brand into territory it had no business being in. It was a luxury car in name only, with performance and features that simply didn't justify its premium price. Ultimately, it stands as a cautionary tale of how taking shortcuts and abandoning a brand's core identity can lead to disastrous results. The 1975 Trabant 601 is widely considered one of the worst cars ever made, a symbol of the technological stagnation that plagued the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War. Produced by the East German manufacturer VEB Sachsenring, the Trabant 601 was an exercise in extreme austerity and outdated design, a car that managed to survive for decades despite being obsolete from the moment it rolled off the assembly line. Built largely unchanged from the 1950s, the 601 epitomized the inefficiencies and limitations of communist-era engineering, delivering a driving experience that was slow, unreliable, and downright uncomfortable. From a technical standpoint, the Trabant 601 was a relic of a bygone era. Its 0.6-liter two-stroke engine produced just 26 horsepower, a minuscule amount of power for a car that weighed over 600 kilograms, 1,300 pounds. This underpowered engine was coupled with a primitive leaf spring suspension, which offered a harsh and bouncy ride, particularly on uneven roads. In theory, the 601 was capable of reaching speeds up to 60 miles, but in practice, it was so slow that it was often outpaced by cyclists and pedestrians. Acceleration was agonizingly slow, making merging onto highways a terrifying experience for drivers, who could only watch as faster cars zoomed past. The Trabant 601's performance was not the only thing that left much to be desired. The car's construction was equally problematic. The body was made from a material called Duroplast, a type of recycled plastic mixed with cotton fibers. While Duroplast was lightweight and durable in theory, it had an unpleasant, cheap feel, making the Trabant 601 seem more like a toy than a real car. The plastic panels were prone to fading and cracking, adding to the car's already dowdy appearance. The overall design was rudimentary and utilitarian, with sharp edges and a boxy shape that looked like something from the 1950s, not the 1970s. It had the charm of a post-war relic, but none of the nostalgia that comes with actual vintage cars. Inside, the Trabant 601 was just as uninspiring. The cabin was Spartan, featuring minimalistic controls, vinyl upholstery, and a dashboard that was as bare bones as they come. Comfort was an afterthought, with basic features like manual windows and a lack of heating and ventilation options. There was barely enough room for passengers, and the lack of insulation meant that the car was unbearably noisy at higher speeds. Even the most basic aspects of the driving experience were a struggle. The steering was vague and unresponsive, the brakes were slow to react, and the gear shift had a tendency to get stuck. The car's interior smelled like a mixture of plastic and oil, an odor that permeated the cabin, making it difficult to forget you were inside something that felt more like a machine than a car. Despite all these flaws, the Trabant 601 remained in production for nearly 3 decades, becoming a symbol of life behind the Iron Curtain. In East Germany, it was a status symbol simply because it was a car, and owning one was considered a mark of some wealth and privilege. The Trabant's existence was marked by long waiting lists, and in some cases, families had to wait for years before they could get their hands on one. But even as the car became ubiquitous in Eastern Europe, its reputation was solidified as one of the most underwhelming vehicles ever created. By the 1980s, the Trabant 601 was a rolling anachronism, a car that had been left behind by the rest of the world. It was slow, unsafe, and inefficient, yet it continued to be produced with only minor modifications, leading to the perception that the East German automotive industry was stuck in the past. At the time, cars in the West were becoming faster, more comfortable, and more advanced. But the Trabant 601 remained stubbornly outdated, a reminder of the inefficiencies and stagnation that characterized life in the Soviet bloc. One owner who had driven the Trabant for years commented, "It was a car that made you appreciate the simple things, like having enough power to get to the top of a hill without rolling back down. It was a car that worked only because it had to. Nothing about it was enjoyable, but at least it was reliable in its own strange way." Another owner recalled, "I drove it across the country once, and it felt like I was sitting in a tin can on wheels. It was a miracle it even worked. But somehow it did, even though it sounded like the engine was about to fall apart every time you hit the accelerator." The 1975 Trabant 601's legacy is one of mediocrity, and it has become a symbol of the inefficiencies and limitations of the Eastern Bloc's automotive industry. While it may have had its place in the context of East German society, it was a car that failed to evolve with the times. Its lack of performance, outdated materials, and lack of basic comforts make it a car that is remembered more for its faults than its achievement. The 1989 Yugo GV, perhaps the most infamous example of automotive failure in the late 20th century, was a car that tried to offer unbeatable affordability, but instead became a symbol of everything wrong with budget cars. It was marketed as the cheapest car in America, a value proposition that promised a basic, no-frills driving experience. However, the Yugo's combination of poor build quality, subpar performance, and frequent reliability issues made it far more notorious than it ever was useful. The Yugo GV failed to meet even the most basic expectations for a car, and in doing so, it earned a place in automotive history as one of the worst cars ever made. The Yugo GV came from the Zastava factory in Yugoslavia, a country that had little experience building cars for the American market. The GV was a rebadged version of the Yugo 45, a compact economy car designed for the European market. When it was introduced in the United States, it came with a price tag that was hard to beat, just $3,990 for the base model. On paper, it seemed like a steal for anyone looking for an entry-level vehicle. However, the low price came at a steep cost in terms of quality, performance, and reliability. The Yugo GV's 1.1-liter four-cylinder engine produced a paltry 55 horsepower, which, coupled with its primitive four-speed manual transmission, made the car extremely slow and lethargic. Acceleration was sluggish, and its top speed hovered just above 80 mph, leaving drivers with little power to pass other cars or tackle hills with any confidence. In a world where compact cars from competitors like Honda and Toyota were offering superior performance and reliability, the Yugo was woefully outmatched. It lacked the smooth driving experience and confident handling that consumers had come to expect from even the most budget-friendly vehicles. But it wasn't just performance that dragged the Yugo down. The build quality was abysmal, even by the standards of the era. The car was constructed with cheap, low-grade materials that didn't hold up well over time. The interior was a harsh, plastic-dominated affair, with uncomfortable seats and sparse features. There was very little to make the Yugo feel like anything more than a bare-bones commuter vehicle. Even the simplest task, like turning the ignition key or adjusting the seat, felt like a chore, thanks to poorly designed parts and unrefined mechanisms. As many owners quickly discovered, the Yugo's reliability was its greatest Achilles heel. The car was plagued by frequent mechanical issues, with problems ranging from electrical failures to engine breakdowns. It was not uncommon for owners to experience rust issues, faulty electrical wiring, and problems with the suspension. In fact, reliability was so poor that the Yugo earned a reputation for breaking down just as often as it ran. Some owners were left stranded on the side of the road more often than they were able to actually drive their Yugo, and the cost of repairing the car often outweighed the car's initial purchase price. In one memorable anecdote, a former Yugo owner remarked, "I remember driving it to work one morning, and the steering wheel literally fell off in my hands. I had to pull over and figure out how to put it back on just to finish my commute. It was like driving a toy car that was held together with duct tape." Another owner, who had purchased a Yugo GV in 1989, recounted, "The thing broke down all the time. I spent more time at the mechanic than I did on the road. It was cheap, sure, but it was a total disaster." The Yugo's poor reputation quickly spread, And by the early 1990s, the once promising car had become a punchline in American pop culture. It wasn't just a bad car, it was the bad car. It was even featured in a series of comedic advertisements in an attempt to spin its failures into humor. Despite the car's attempts to capitalize on its low price, it became a symbol of the failure to meet even the most basic standards of automotive engineering. The American public grew disillusioned and sales plummeted after just a few years. In the end, the Yugo was discontinued in the US by 1992 and the brand itself faded into obscurity. The legacy of the 1989 Yugo GV is one of failure, disappointment, and embarrassment for both its manufacturers and its owners. The car's attempt to break into the US market by offering the cheapest price resulted in an experience that no one would want to repeat. While the Yugo's initial low cost may have seemed appealing, the reality of owning one was a constant struggle against poor quality and frequent breakdowns. For many, the Yugo became synonymous with cheap in the worst possible way. A car that cost too much to maintain and provided too little in return. It remains one of the most enduring examples of how a car's low price can never make up for its utter lack of value in other areas. Today, the Yugo GV stands as a cautionary tale about cutting costs. The 1976 Aston Martin Lagonda stands as one of the most infamous examples of automotive overreach and failure. A car that promised futuristic luxury, but delivered a technological nightmare. Introduced as a high-end luxury saloon with a design that looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie, the Lagonda was marketed as an avant-garde masterpiece that would revolutionize the automotive world. However, behind its sleek, wedge-shaped exterior and cutting-edge interior, the car was plagued with insurmountable technical issues that turned it into a cautionary tale of overcomplicating the car-making process. The Lagonda's most striking feature was its bold, futuristic design, which was penned by the legendary William Townes. With sharp angles, a low profile, and a forward-thinking stance, the car looked incredibly modern for its time, almost too modern. The exterior, which resembled a spaceship more than a traditional luxury sedan, was matched with an equally groundbreaking interior that featured a full digital dashboard with glowing red and orange lights, push-button controls, and a central console that looked more like a control panel than the interior of a car. The Lagonda was designed to impress, and it did, but for all the wrong reasons. Underneath the eye-catching design, however, lay a flawed technological infrastructure that would prove to be the Lagonda's undoing. The car was equipped with one of the most complex and ambitious electronic systems ever seen in a production car at the time. Aston Martin made the bold decision to outfit the Lagonda with a fully digital dashboard that replaced traditional analog gauges. This cutting-edge system, however, was a disaster from the start. The digital displays were prone to constant failure, frequently flickering, cutting out entirely, or displaying incorrect information. While this was an exciting leap forward on paper, in practice, the system was woefully unreliable. Owners quickly discovered that the Lagonda's advanced electronics weren't just temperamental, they were also extremely difficult and expensive to repair. The dashboard system was essentially a one-off design, making it incredibly difficult for mechanics to find parts or troubleshoot issues. The car's intricate wiring harness, which linked the digital displays, climate control, and various other electronic components often shorted out, leaving owners with a car that was, more often than not, either malfunctioning or completely immobilized. The Lagonda wasn't just unreliable in terms of its electronics, it was also plagued by issues with its mechanical systems. The car's V8 engine, while powerful, was prone to overheating and failure. Coupled with an automatic transmission that had a tendency to be slow and unresponsive, the Lagonda's performance was far from the refined experience one would expect from an Aston Martin. Despite its technological ambitions, the Lagonda was slow to accelerate, unrefined in its handling, and generally disappointing on the road. It was a car that looked like it should perform like a dream, but instead delivered a frustrating and lackluster experience. Another issue was the car's build quality. Despite its high price tag, the Lagonda wasn't as well built as one might expect from a luxury car of that era. Interior trim pieces often didn't fit properly, and the car's bodywork was prone to rust, especially in the more humid climates where it was sold. Aston Martin, already a small manufacturer with limited resources, struggled to keep up with the demand for the Lagonda, resulting in a car that was hastily assembled and often lacking the attention to detail that would normally define the brand. One owner, recalling his experience with the Lagonda, remarked, "It was a beautiful car to look at, but driving it was a nightmare. The electronics were constantly malfunctioning, and I remember the dashboard would randomly shut off, leaving me driving blind." The mechanics at the time just shrugged and said, "It's the Lagonda, what did you expect?" Another owner added, "I was excited about the car's looks and technology, but it broke down so often I considered just leaving it in my garage. It's a car that I love to show off, but hated to drive." Despite its striking appearance and ambitious features, the 1976 Aston Martin Lagonda became one of the most poorly received luxury cars of the 1970s. The complexity of its technology, combined with frequent reliability issues, turned what should have been a groundbreaking car into a monumental failure. The Lagonda's digital dashboard and intricate electronics, while innovative, were far ahead of their time and not in a good way. They were simply too advanced for a car of the 1970s to manage effectively. The car's legacy is that of a failed experiment, a car that looked like it could usher in a new era of automotive design, but instead served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of overcomplex. The 1997 GM EV1 is often hailed as a visionary car, a bold step into the future of electric vehicles and EVs. However, despite its technological advancements, the EV1 ultimately became one of the most controversial and frustratingly short-lived cars in automotive history. While the EV1 was ahead of its time in many ways, its limited range, high cost, and the eventual decision by General Motors to recall and destroy every single one of the cars led to widespread outrage among its loyal early adopters and solidified the EV1's place in history as both a pioneer and a symbol of what could have been. The EV1 was a groundbreaking attempt by GM to produce a practical, mass-market electric vehicle. Launched in '97 as part of GM's Project Saturn, the EV1 was designed to be a compact, efficient, and environmentally friendly car. With sleek, futuristic styling and a lightweight design, it was an early glimpse into what electric cars could be: silent, clean, and emissions-free. The EV1 was powered by a lead-acid battery, which, while a significant leap forward at the time, still limited the car's range to about 70 to 100 miles on a full charge. Despite its cutting-edge look and the promise of an eco-friendly future, the EV1's range was simply not enough for many drivers, especially those used to the convenience of gasoline-powered cars that could travel hundreds of miles on a single tank. Charging stations were limited, and the technology to rapidly charge electric vehicles was still in its infancy. The limited range meant that the EV1 was largely impractical for long-distance driving, relegating it to city use for most drivers. While GM made strides with battery technology and range improvements over time, the fundamental limitations of the early EV1 remained an obstacle. Another critical issue with the EV1 was its cost. While the car was marketed as a high-tech, eco-friendly alternative to traditional vehicles, it came with a premium price tag that many potential buyers found prohibitive. The EV1's cost, around $33,000 for the base model in 1997, was higher than many conventional vehicles at the time. This made it a tough sell for the average consumer, and the car's niche appeal meant that it was only ever available to a select few. Even those who did manage to lease the vehicle found themselves faced with significant maintenance costs, as parts for such an unusual vehicle were difficult to find and specialized service technicians were rare. Yet perhaps the most infamous aspect of the EV1's history was the decision by General Motors to recall and ultimately destroy all of the vehicles. Despite its early adopters' enthusiasm and the car's potential to change the future of transportation, GM made the controversial decision to pull the plug on the EV1 in the early 2000s. The automaker claimed that the EV1 was not commercially viable due to its limited range, and the lack of market demand for electric vehicles. However, many believe that GM's true motivation was its reluctance to fully commit to electric vehicles, as they would have threatened the company's lucrative market for gasoline-powered cars. GM not only ceased production of the EV1, but also demanded that all leased vehicles be returned, even going so far as to physically destroy them. This decision sparked outrage among the EV1's passionate owners, who saw their cars as a symbol of progress and environmental consciousness. For them, the destruction of the EV1 felt like a betrayal by the company that had initially promised to change the automotive industry. One former EV1 owner recalled, "It was the future. It was unlike anything I had ever driven before. I was so excited when I got it. Then one day GM told me to return the car. I thought it was just a temporary recall, but no, they were taking it back forever. They destroyed them, and I watched them go to the scrap heap. It was like they didn't care about us at all. It was heartbreaking." Another owner described the experience. "I knew the car had its limitations, but I still believed in it. I thought that this was the future of cars, and then to have GM just take it all away, destroy it, and never give it a chance. It felt like a betrayal. It was like they never really believed in electric cars in the first place. They only wanted to make money from fossil fuels." The legacy of the GM EV1 is one of lost opportunity and a powerful reminder of how corporate interests can sometimes stand in the way of technological progress. The EV1 was far from perfect. It had a limited range, high cost, and was essentially ahead of its time in a world that wasn't ready to embrace electric vehicles. However, it also represented a glimpse into a future where electric cars were a viable alternative to gasoline-powered vehicles. Today, the EV1 remains a symbol of both the potential and the challenges of electric vehicles.